Hey everyone, welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet with Michael Beller, Jake Ciely, and Brandon Funston. Draft season in hot pursuit here. We are now talking about players with ADPs on the rise over the last few weeks. Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet, of course, brought to you by Jock Market. Guys, we've got a lot of interesting names here on this list. The first one who I want to talk about is Stefon Diggs. We're seeing him climb up draft boards now with an ADP in NFFC leagues of 37.42. So that's putting you right at the end of the third round, beginning of the fourth round of a 12-team league. Of course, we know Stefon Diggs making the move from Minnesota to Buffalo to be Josh Allen's new best friend, perhaps erase some of those mistakes that Josh Allen often has in overthrowing his receivers. I'll say this for the Bills. It is very hard to overthrow Stefon Diggs and John Brown. So they got the right type of receiver for Josh Allen. Jake, where are you on Stefon Diggs right now?
I have zero shares to Stefon Diggs. I'm the low man. At least that's what people yell at me in the comments about too, is that I'm the low man. It really doesn't come down to Stefon Diggs. I love Stefon Diggs. I just don't love the team. And it really comes down to Josh Allen as well. Josh Allen, 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. I do have him having a better passing season, but we now move John Brown, who performed well as the wide receiver one, which that's what a lot of people are telling me too, is that Stefon Diggs is definitively better than John Brown. And while that might be true overall, I don't think it's as clear as debate as some people make it. And I actually think the fact that John Brown is now the number two and Cole Beasley isn't, now John Brown is going to destroy number two corners. I don't think John Brown's just going to fall off into irrelevancy. So if that's even a word, I just made it one. So I just think that if you look at Stefon Diggs, I love him. And I think this is a great fit for Josh Allen as what he needs, similar to what the Panthers finally did with Cam Newton towards the end of his career. But if you look at his career with the Panthers, but Stefon Diggs overall, it really comes out to touchdowns. Is he going to get 7, 8, 9? I mean, he had 7 or 8 like at times with the Vikings, and I just don't have that for him. I think he's going to be right around 900 to 1,000 yards, and that puts him in wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Jake said. You can look at John Brown and say he was the number 22 fantasy wide receiver last year. Why can't Stefon Diggs be that guy? Well, John Brown didn't have anybody close to him talent-wise at wide receiver. Now you bring Diggs in, and Jake mentions you got John Brown running number 2 against the number 2 corners. They're going to take advantage of that. I also think they bring in Zach Moss, and I would not be surprised if they up their running game even more so and lean a lot on that backfield. We heard they want to get Devin Singletary more involved in the passing game. Dawson Knox is emerging. I just don't think it's a big passing pie, and it's an inconsistent one at that with Josh Allen throwing the ball. Said this a lot. I think Stefon Diggs is going to have some great fantasy games in which you're going to be very happy you had him in your lineup. There's going to be very many along the way as well where he's going to give you, something close to nothing, like a 334 kind of game with no touchdowns, in which you're going to be like, what am I going to do with this guy,
All right, guys, the big summer riser this season is definitely Damien Harris. I think we can all remember back a couple of months where it seemed like every single night, no matter where you lived in the country, you were hearing fireworks, right? All over the place, fireworks, fireworks, fireworks. I don't remember any of those big streamers up in the sky having a Damien Harris logo or anything on them, but it seems like that's exactly what his ADP is doing. You are not hearing anything but great words coming out of Patriots camp right now, an ADP of 144.7. So that puts him right at the end of the 12th round of 12-team leagues. We know Lamar Miller is there. We know James White is going to have his role. His role is not changing, but still, there is so much good news on Damien Harris coming out of Patriots camp that, quite frankly, I'm surprised this isn't even higher. I'm not really much of a Damien Harris guy. I sort of choose to fade this backfield as a whole. But at 144.7, you're really not sacrificing much in the way of draft day capital that you're really feeling bad about Damien Harris if you end up getting rid of him. Have you guys changed your thoughts at all on him this summer?
Let me get my Damien Harris jersey. No, I'm just kidding. This is Brandon knows this from doing shows with. Actually, you know it as well. As I keep going back to one thing about Damien Harris's talent, and I reference 2 things. One is in college, people saw him run and they were like, "Oh, is he maybe better than Josh Jacobs?" And so, while I wouldn't put that conversation out there, I would say they are at least competing talent-wise. And then last year, when the Patriots drafted Damien Harris, everybody went panic mode because they're like, "Oh my God, what does this mean for Sony Michel?" He has injuries to start the season, that being Damien Harris, never gets really off on the right foot. There's no pun intended there. But the fact that he was behind, he never got a chance to show Belichick, basically get Belichick's trust. And we're always scared of this backfield. I'm not saying don't be scared of Belichick. I'm not saying trust this backfield. I'm not saying that at all. But what you just said, Beller, is the point. Because he's still a 12th rounder, that's why he's so good. I would even still take him in the 10th round, because if he is the guy, if we do get back to LeGarrette Blount days, or do we get back to the days of at least not the 18 touchdowns, but somebody who does get 15 consistent touches every single week, Damien Harris is going to be at least an RB3. And for right now, for that upside cost you nothing.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. It's just so cheap. It's worth the gamble. Everybody has a price. And, you can say, oh, I got these guys on my do not draft list. But, I could say AJ Green's on my do not draft list. But if he falls and keeps falling, I'd absolutely take him at a certain point. And I don't really want to be invested in the Bill Belichick backfield. But at the, as you said, a 12th round cost for Damien Harris could really take the lead job, not the passing role, but could take the Sonny Michel role and run with it. And Sonny Michel may never be able to catch up. And it could be Damien Harris who kind of, is the new Sonny Michel this year at a 12th round price. It's worth a dice roll. Absolutely. It's a great place to go ahead and see if that works out.
Brandon $1 Million Man Funston, they call him. Everybody's got a price. That Damien Harris price, definitely not a bad one. Let's move on to another running back here. It is Ronald Jones. Now, as we are sitting here, Ronald Jones has just suffered an injury in training camp on Friday's practice. Word is that it's something that Tampa Bay is not too concerned about. We're going to approach it in that spirit. A 58.52 ADP. That is the back end of the 5th round of a 12-team draft. Guys, I think we just talked about this, the three of us, on an episode of the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. This backfield just feels like all kinds of headache for me. The one guy who I am actually interested in a little bit at his price is Dare Ogunbowale, because of his pass-catching ability and the fact that Tom Brady's going to want a pass-catching back who he trusts. Inside the top 5 rounds, especially dealing with this injury, I don't want any piece of Ronald Jones. Brandon, where are you on the Bucs back?
I don't own a piece of Ronald Jones. He has done a good job. I think, coming into the draft season was a big debate on whether to go Keyshawn Vaughn or Ronald Jones. And we saw in the ADP those guys back to back a lot of times. And Ronald Jones, for his part, has done a good job of kind of separating. I'm not sure if LaShawn McCoy has any role this season other than mentor and emergency, in case of emergency, break glass. But I'm not going to rule out that if Ronald Jones is underwhelming, that Keyshawn Vaughn gets back into this picture. And I'm not really sure if, with Dare Ogunbowale there as well and taking a lot of the passing down work, that, there's a real big earner here in fantasy.
Yeah, I think the concern here is Ronald Jones truly improved, as we're hearing? Is Bruce Arians telling the truth, which would not be a surprise that he never tells the truth when it comes to running backs. I mean, you could go back to the last 3 seasons and mark where he was lying to us about it. But if it's his job, if it's Ronald Jones' job, not to go back to LeGarrette Blount too again, but again, not the 18 touchdowns, but if he gets double-digit rushing touchdowns, even just on 180 carries, and that's what we're going for here. I think the price has now started to get to the point where he has to be their lead running back and has to get 14 to 16 carries a game. And that's why I'll fade him at that spot. I'm not too excited about the Goon. I'm not too excited about Keyshawn Vaughn, a beat reporter for us. Our very own Almon said that, hey, he'll be on special teams. So I'm not too worried about trying to figure out the rest with McCoy there too. But I think Ronald Jones is the only interest I have, but now his price is too much.
ADP changes big at this time of year. Again, 2 huge draft weekends coming up, starting this weekend, and then a big one next weekend on Labor Day too. We'll be watching that with you over these next couple of weeks. This is the Athletics Fantasy Cheat Sheet, brought to you by Jock Market. Get 30% off a subscription to The Athletic if you go to theathletic.com/draftkit.